this evening. Now, the incidence of revision total hip arthroplasty is increasing. Kurtz, I think this is one of the most quoted papers in modern orthopedics, showed in 2007 the remarkable increase in both primary and revision hip replacement. And Andy Toms and his team from Exeter showed exactly the same trend in the UK 7 years later. And this was not even considering the incidence of re-revisions, which is popping up on all registries across the world. So it's likely that those figures are actually understated. And this is one of the reasons why medicine is good. And if we look at the population tree, the projected population tree for India, by 2050, there's a significant increase in the number of patients who are age 65 and over. And with the increasing frailty and the greater number of patients requiring arthroplasty, it is not unreasonable to say that the incidence of revision hip replacement is going to continue to rise. In a very basic and important sense, when considering the issues of reconstruction, it's really the patient issues, the soft tissue envelope, and then the bony issues. And I'm going to focus on the bone this evening. So Rami mentioned this, but the etiology of bone loss is really important to consider in femoral reconstruction. Each of them have their own unique challenges that they pose to obtaining stable femoral fixation, and they often requires subtle differences in the approach to these patients. Implant removal there is in a different color because I think it is, irrespective of the indication, it's one of the most important aspects of assessing femoral bone defects, because actually the predicted defect which results after implant removal is where you start reconstruction, and that's a vital part of planning. Irrespective of the etiology of bone loss, the aims of revision remain the same. And so establishment of the center of rotation, restoration of biomechanics, and then the ability to give the patient a pain-free, stable, and durable joint with restoration of bone stock, if possible. Several classifications or several authors have tried to help guide us in this respect. And I think the Poprosky classification for me certainly has been the most important one, originally published in 1998 and recently reviewed by Della Valle and Poprosky himself. So the type 1 defect, intact metaphysis and diaphysis, and that's a surgeon's dream. That's where you want to be. Type 2, which is the most common, damage to the metaphysis, but an intact diaphyseal tube. Type 3, there's non-supportive metaphysis, but more than 4 centimeters of an intact diaphyseal tube, and type 4, where there's type 3B, where there's less than 4 centimeters of diaphyseal tube. Type 4 is possibly one of the most challenging reconstructive situations, where there's an ectasia of the femur with no metaphyseal or diaphyseal support. Now, I can't overstate the importance of planning in these situations. Assessment of the cause of failure, assessment of the bone stock, decisions on how to remove the in situ components, and then prediction of the type of bone defect after this are absolutely critical to approaching these patients. And it's at that point that fixation options can then be assessed, and often a plan A, B, C, and sometimes more are required before you enter the OR. So type 1, relatively straightforward: primary stems, proximally porous coated stems, proximally HA coated stems, and of course cemented stems can be used in this situation. Type 2, which is the most common type, not dissimilar: metaphyseal fit and fill stems, diaphyseal fitting stems, and cemented stems, along with femoral impaction grafting in this situation. There are other techniques that have been developed and described which have shown good success in the long term. And in London in the 90s, in Stanmore, custom CAD-CAM proximally fit and fill HA-coated components showed excellent results in the long term. And these were CAD-CAM designs from X-rays, not CT planning. The type 3 defects are where it gets interesting, because here, this is where tapered fluted titanium stems have really shown better scores, better outcomes, less proximal femoral stress shielding, and improved proximal femoral bone remodeling when compared to the stiffer cylindrical cobalt chrome stems. And that's what's shown in the literature. At this time, I was in Vancouver doing my fellowship, and quite a few results came from that unit at the time. showing excellent clinical results at 2 to 7 year follow-up with low revision rates. One of my roles there, and I met the tapered fluted non-modular titanium stem, and we started using this, and I became a big fan of it. Managed to publish the results. So at the 2 to 5 year follow-up, patient reported outcome measures as well as functional scores and physical scores were all excellent with this. And what we found was that in almost everyone, there was proximal femoral bone remodeling, and we thought that this was due to the modulus of elasticity of titanium, union of almost all ETOs used, and no aseptic loosening. And these are all pluses. I think type 3 defects are a slightly different beast to all the others because there's some subtleties about it. While you have an intact diaphysis, things like varus remodeling of the proximal femur need to really be assessed for. And you see the two divergent lines, which shows the two directions of the metaphyseal region and the diaphyseal region. And this can pose difficulties when reconstructing with a straight stem. So one tip on recognizing this is the so-called trochanter over medulla sign, highlighted there by the green circle. And that's the Tom sign that Professor Duncan in Vancouver taught me to look for, and I still do look for it. Oftentimes, one needs to consider a corrective osteotomy when reconstructing in this situation. The type 4 defect is very challenging, and this is really the realm of specialized reconstruction. So allograft prosthesis composites, which have been discussed and described mainly by Poprosky himself, the use of megaprostheses, and then the cemented stems with femoral impaction grafting. And then specialized techniques such as the internal proximal femoral replacement technique, which was described from the team at Stanmore. The role of the, I should say this carefully, many of the modern papers on femoral reconstruction concentrate mainly on uncemented components, but there is a role for femoral impaction grafting in these. And when I worked in Exeter, I learned this, and it's in the literature, and in fact, in the recent literature. Matt Wilson, who was one of the Exeter surgeons, published possibly the biggest case series on femoral impaction grafting, and they had excellent survivorship for aseptic loosening at almost 15 years. So this summary is from the Della Valle and Poprosky paper, and I think it's a good summary. I would add a few things to it. I think that for the type 2 defects, diaphyseal fitting stems work well, and we must consider other designs, HA-coated stems, for example. I think there is no real controversy with the type 1 and type 4 defects, but type 3, tapered fluted modular titanium stems and tapered fluted monoblock titanium stems have shown excellent results in this setting. And I think that the understated element is the cemented stem and femoral impaction grafting. I think this is a viable option for all of these defects, and I think it should be part of the surgeon's armamentarium. So thank you very much for your time.